the peaceful town of Riverside, Connecticut, a biker gang known as the Crimson Riders thought they had picked an easy target, a blind 7-year-old girl named Lily Bennett. They assumed they could scare her. What they didn't know was that this would be the worst mistake they'd ever make. Because Lily's mother, Grace, wasn't just a regular parent. She was one of the most dangerous Navy SEALs to ever serve. Over 200 missions, 3 continents, 0 hesitation. What began as a petty attempt at schoolyard intimidation would explode into a full-scale reckoning, a story of justice, payback, and the kind of love that rewrites the rules of survival. And in the end, the gang would learn a brutal truth. Sometimes, the deadliest predator is the one you never see coming. This is the true story of how a ruthless biker crew underestimated a blind child and paid the ultimate price when her mother decided enough was enough. Quick pause. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. And if this story has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be wild. Now back to Riverside. The crisp scent of fall drifted through Maple Street as dry leaves danced along the pavement. 7-year-old Lily Bennett walked beside her mom, her white cane tapping out a steady rhythm. She knew every crack in that sidewalk by memory. "Mom," she whispered, "someone's watching us." Grace didn't look up. She didn't need to. "Across the street," Lily continued softly. "Their breathing's weird, like they're trying to stay quiet but can't." Grace kept walking casual, but her instincts were already on high alert. She'd clocked the man. Leather jacket, military boots, fake reading a newspaper. His posture screamed ex-cop or ex-military. "What else do you notice?" Grace asked, keeping her voice calm. "The paper never moved," Lily said. "Real people make paper noises." A quiet smile tugged at Grace's mouth. Her daughter's senses were razor sharp. Over the years, Lily had learned to read a world she couldn't see, and in some ways, she saw more than most. That man wasn't the first. Grace had spotted 2 other strangers trailing them earlier that week. Something in Riverside was shifting. Outside the school gates, Grace knelt beside Lily. "Remember what we practiced? If something's wrong, I go to Mrs. Watson's office," Lily replied without hesitation. "She has the special phone number." Grace watched her daughter walk toward the entrance, her movements precise, confident. Other parents waved, smiling, none of them aware that the special number connected to a series of contingency plans Grace had quietly built since day 1. Across town, Grace stepped into the corner cafe. Ray, the owner, slid her the usual. "Trouble's brewing," Ray muttered. 3 bikes parked behind my diner, red skull patches, asking around." Grace took a slow sip of black coffee. Crimson Riders, she'd heard the rumors. Extortion, intimidation, expanding into new counties. And now, apparently, they'd come to Riverside. Ray continued. "Beth, Chief Holbrook, came in earlier. Says same pattern as other towns. They start slow, scouting. Then they hit vulnerable targets first." Grace froze mid-sip. Vulnerable targets. Like a blind 7-year-old girl. The bell over the door chimed. In walked Doc Wilson, the local physician who treated Lily's allergies. His tone was low. "Had a couple of men stop by my clinic today, told me I might need insurance. Their kind." Grace didn't flinch, but the pressure in her fingers on the coffee cup told a different story. "They mention anyone else?" "The school," Doc said quietly, "specifically the special needs program." Grace felt that old cold steel settle back into her chest, the part of her she hadn't used in years. She had chosen Riverside for its calm, a place where Lily could grow up in peace. She'd built a quiet life, a life where her daughter could thrive. But now the Crimson Riders were circling, looking for soft spots, pressure points, cracks they could widen, and Grace knew they'd just picked the wrong family. "There's a town meeting tonight," Ray added, "at the Commons. Chief wants to get ahead of the panic." Grace nodded. "I'll be there. Gotta grab Lily's library books first." But it wasn't just about books. From the library's 2nd floor, Grace had a clear view of the schoolyard. She watched as Lily played during recess, but something was off. Her cane was tapping faster, her sweeps shorter. Lily could feel it too. Even without sight, she knew something dark had come to town. And on the other side of the fence, two men in red-patched leather vests stood watching her, not moving. The riders had arrived, and they were about to find out what happens when you threaten the wrong mother. Parked in plain sight near the school's main entrance, Marcus Terror Thompson and Tom Typhoon Richards weren't just there to watch. According to Grace's intel, this was no coincidence. It was a message, not just to the school, but to the entire town. Her phone buzzed. A message from Chief Beth Holbrook. They're moving faster than expected. 6 businesses approach today. We need to talk before the meeting. An hour later, inside Beth's office, Grace scanned a row of surveillance photos. Crimson Riders posted up outside town landmarks, churches, small shops, the food pantry. The pattern was undeniable. They're organized, Beth said. Military precision. These aren't just thugs on bikes. Grace leaned in. She recognized it too. The placement of the lookouts, the way they covered entrances. This was tactical. Beth nodded grimly. Terror Thompson, dishonorably discharged. His core crew has similar records. They're using real training to run a criminal enterprise. Grace kept her expression neutral, a worried mother. But internally, her mind was alive, noting sniper lines, camera blind spots, potential ambush points. That side of her never really went dormant. They'll hit the school next, Beth continued. Programs like special needs funding, after-school care, the services families depend on. Then they'll squeeze the businesses. Classic siege tactics. Isolate, pressure, exploit, Grace responded quietly. The town won't let that happen. Beth hesitated. They might not have a choice. Small police force, limited budget. By the time we get back up, the damage will be done. Then the office phone rang. Beth answered, her face darkening. They just confronted Barbara Prescott, she said. Suggested she'll think tomorrow's school funding vote. Grace stood, smooth and steady. I'll head to the Commons, help set up for the meeting. Beth held her gaze. In 3 years, she'd never asked the questions. About Grace's discipline, her calculated steps, the way she always sat facing the door. But now, the truth was starting to show. Outside, autumn shadows stretched across Maple Street as Grace walked to pick up Lily. Inside the after-school program, Lily was showing classmates how to tell quarters from nickels by touch. Mom! Lily lit up at the sound of her mother's steps. No eyesight needed. Love had its own way of recognizing someone. I helped Emily learn all the quarters today. Grace smiled and pulled her daughter into a hug, inhaling the scent of crayons and chalk dust. For 3 years, she'd played her part, the quiet single mom, just trying to raise her daughter. But as they walked home, Grace noticed 3 more motorcycles glide by. Slow, intentional. Their riders weren't lost. They were marking routes, counting security cameras, measuring responses. The Crimson Riders weren't just entering Riverside, they were casing it, and they thought they'd found the perfect pressure point. A child who couldn't see and a town too small to push back. What they didn't know is that they just declared war on a woman who defined invisible warfare. Grace's phone buzzed again. Beth again. 2 more spotted near the school. They're photographing kids at recess. Her thumb moved over the screen with a reflex born of years in war zones. She hadn't planned to ever use those skills again, but they were still there. She had built this quiet life to protect Lily. Now she would defend it with everything she had, because the gang had made one fatal error. They thought they were the predators. Appreciate you sticking with us. These stories take time to write and research. If you're enjoying it, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Now, back to the story. At the Riverside Commons, tension hung thick in the air as townsfolk packed into the aging auditorium. Grace sat near the back, every exit in her line of sight. Lily was next to her, tracing calming patterns on Grace's palm, a habit that helped her stay grounded in noisy crowds. They're scared, Lily whispered. Everyone's heartbeats are fast. Like when there's thunder. Grace gave her hand a light squeeze. Lily had always felt things deeply, especially what others tried to hide. At the front, Chief Beth Holbrook took the stage. Her uniform was crisp, but the weariness in her voice betrayed the pressure she was under. As many of you have noticed, Beth began, we've had new visitors in town. The Crimson Riders Motorcycle Club is expanding into nearby communities. We're monitoring the situation. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. David Park, who ran the hardware store, stood up. Monitoring? They threatened my daughter today. Said accidents happen to people without protection. Other voices joined in, each story worse than the last. Grace listened quietly, eyes scanning the auditorium. She spotted 3 men, civilian clothes but military posture. Watching, listening, the gang was gathering intel. Who looked afraid? Who might fight back? Who they'd have to silence? Beth continued. We've contacted state authorities, but the tightness in her jaw told Grace everything. Help wouldn't come fast enough. And as the meeting spiraled into shouting, half the room demanding police action, others afraid to speak up, Grace knew the riders weren't just knocking on Riverside's door. They were already inside. And if someone didn't push back soon, this town wouldn't be theirs anymore. Some in the room called for action. Others, more afraid, whispered about waiting, keeping quiet until outside help arrived. Grace watched it all, noting faces. Who was ready to fight, and who was already folding? Then she caught a subtle nod from Ray across the room. He was signaling. 2 more Crimson Riders had just entered. Mike Avalanche Peterson and Steve Shock Jackson. No attempt to blend in. They wanted to be seen. They wanted the town to feel watched. Lily's hand tightened suddenly. Mom, someone smells like motor oil and leather. They're standing right behind us. Grace already knew who it was. She had heard the breathing pattern a moment ago. Slow, heavy, full of control. Marcus Terror Thompson. The gang's leader had slipped in quietly during the debate, and now his voice rose above the crowd with calculated calm. Seems like folks are getting worked up over nothing, he said. His fake smile oozed menace. We're just businessmen, looking to invest in this nice little community. The room froze. Beth's hand moved instinctively toward her holster, but Terror raised both hands slowly, mock innocent. Just here to listen, he added. Public meeting, right? Grace felt Lily inch closer. Her daughter could sense shifts in tone before most people even registered them. Terror strolled down the center aisle, boots loud, deliberate. The crowd parted. People leaned away. Grace didn't move. Her breathing didn't change. She was still playing the role, the tired, fragile, single mother. But behind her calm eyes, she was already mapping escape routes, calculating angles, identifying weaknesses. Way I see it, Terror said, turning to the audience. Towns like this need protection. World's getting ugly, and for a small fee, we make sure nothing bad happens to good people. Beth fired back, like Miller's Creek? Before those accidents started happening? Terror smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. Accidents happen, Chief. Smart folks, take precautions. His gaze swept the room like a laser. He wasn't just talking, he was studying, watching for nervous tics, downcast eyes, subtle flinches. When his eyes landed on Grace and Lily, Grace dropped her shoulders, softened her posture, and added a hint of fatigue to her face. Just another overworked mom, playing weak while taking mental aim. Then came the twist of the knife. Take the school, Terror said with mock concern. Lots of vulnerable kids there, blind ones especially. They need special protection. The threat was crystal clear, and it hit the room like a crack of thunder. Sleep on it, he said as he turned to leave. We'll be around tomorrow to discuss terms, individually. As he passed Grace and Lily, he paused. Cute kid, he said. Must be tough, raising a blind one alone. Grace didn't blink, but Lily, sharp as ever, tapped a pattern into her mom's palm, their private code for danger. We manage, Grace replied coolly, but her mind had already taken him apart. Left knee, off balance, gun hand, twitched, nerve damage. He was a threat, yes, but he wasn't invincible. After the meeting, Beth pulled Grace aside while Ray took Lily for a cup of hot chocolate. They're escalating, Beth said quietly. That comment about blind kids, he wasn't just talking. That was a message. Grace watched out the window as Terror and his crew mounted up and pulled away. Their formation was tight, disciplined, not a gang, a unit. They'll use the school first, she said. The special needs programs as leverage. I've got 2 officers on campus patrol, Beth offered, but that's not enough. It won't be, Grace said flatly. She knew how operations like this worked. She'd run them, pressure the weak points, escalate, force, surrender. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Grace stood alone in the basement. Behind a false panel in the wall were the tools she'd locked away, the life she'd buried. Weapons, tactical gear, everything she'd once needed to survive behind enemy lines. She could end this, right now, but it would cost her the one thing she'd fought hardest to protect, Lily's normal life. She needed another way, something silent, invisible, untraceable. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ray. They're watching your house, black SUV, 2 bikes on rotation. Grace moved through her bedtime routine like nothing was wrong, but her mind was in motion, mapping, analyzing, calculating. Every move precise. Every detail mattered. The Crimson Riders thought they were stalking prey. They had no idea they'd stepped into the kill zone of a former predator, one whose claws were still very, very sharp. Upstairs, Lily stirred. Mom, the motorcycles are back. Grace sat beside her, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. I know, sweetheart, but remember what I taught you? That sometimes things that feel scary are just scared themselves, Lily whispered back. That's right, and I'll always protect you. Lily reached up, fingertips grazing her mother's face, searching for the truth. You're not scared, she said quietly. Your jaw's tight, like when you're fixing something that's broken. Grace smiled and kissed her forehead. Sleep now, she whispered. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. Grace's phone lit up again. Another message from Chief Beth Holbrook. They're going after the school board tonight, threatening families. Grace didn't hesitate. Watch the school tomorrow, she replied. Because tomorrow, the Crimson Riders were going to learn a lesson, a very painful one. See, Grace didn't survive hundreds of combat missions by being predictable. She survived by turning her enemy's strengths into weapons against them. And now, anyone who came for her daughter was about to become very, very weak. Dawn broke over Riverside Elementary, quiet. Too quiet. Grace stood across the street watching. 3 Crimson Riders had already taken up visible positions near the entrance. Their leather cuts caught the dull morning light like warning flags. Steve "Shock" Jackson leaned casually against his bike, twirling a hunting knife like it was a toy. Lily held her mother's hand tightly. The air feels different today, she whispered. Her cane tapped its steady rhythm against the pavement, but her grip told Grace all she needed to know. Storms were coming. Grace's trained eyes swept the scene. 4 more gang members were in position. 1 in a parked sedan, 1 in a pickup, another fake reading a newspaper, and 1 dressed as a maintenance worker. Their formation was textbook, strategic. Control the approach, cut off escape, apply pressure. Remember what I told you about storms? Grace said softly. Sometimes, Lily replied, the best shelter isn't the obvious one. As they neared the school gates, Shock stepped forward, knife still in hand. Morning, ladies, he smirked. Beautiful day for a safety inspection. Grace placed herself slightly in front of Lily. Her eyes tracked the others. They were repositioning, closing gaps, corralling them. We just had our inspection, she said calmly. Last week. Shock smiled wider. Different kind of safety. We heard some concerns, blind kids especially. All those hazards they can't see coming. His voice was sweet poison. The threat was obvious and deliberate. Lily's small hand tapped a pattern into her mother's palm. Their private signal, multiple threats, closing in. Mom, Lily said calmly, someone's behind us. They're trying to breathe quietly, like you taught me to notice. Shock blinked. Smart kid. He recovered quickly. Good hearing. Shame if something ever happened to that. That did it. Grace's body tensed subtly, muscles coiling, reflexes primed. Shock was favoring his right side. The man behind them was too close, too confident. All of them were making fatal mistakes. She could end it right here. But then, flashing lights. Beth's cruiser turned the corner, sirens chirping once. The gang scattered like shadows, practiced, polished. Shock stayed put, the only one bold enough to remain. "This ain't over," he called as Grace walked Lily through the school gates. "Boss wants to talk, real personal, about your daughter's future." Inside the admin office, Beth was already waiting. "Got your message," she said, eyes on Shock through the glass. "They're getting bolder, escalating fast." "They're using the kids as leverage," Grace said flatly. "Skipping the slow game, pushing hard, fast." Lily tugged gently on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, is this like what you told me about bullies? That they act meanest right before someone stands up to them?" Beth looked at Grace. Grace looked at her daughter. "Exactly right," she whispered. "Exactly right." Mrs. Watson came to escort Lily to class. Grace gave her one last nod, her eyes following her daughter down the hallway until she disappeared around the corner. Beth turned back, her voice lower now. "They've never moved this fast before. This is different. It's coordinated, military-level tactics." Grace nodded slowly, watching yet another Crimson Rider roll by the school. "This isn't intimidation," she said. "It's an operation. If they take the school, they control the town." Throughout the morning, Grace kept up her normal routine, but behind her eyes, a different war was being fought. She studied gang movement, patrols, rotation schedules, communication timing. It was professional, clean, which meant it could be predicted. And if it could be predicted, it could be dismantled. At Ray's diner, Grace met Doc Wilson for lunch. He looked grim. "They came by again this morning," he said. "Told me kids get hurt all the time. Sports injuries, blind children especially, lots of falls." Grace set her coffee cup down silently, but her fingers tightened around it like a vice. "They're targeting every support Lily depends on," she said. "School, medical, therapy." Ray slid into the booth beside them. They hit Barbara Prescott again, threatened to expose her son's rehab records if she doesn't flip her vote on school funding. Grace nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. But inside, the map was forming. Vectors, lines of attack, every gap in their coverage, every pattern they didn't know they were revealing. Her phone buzzed again. "Beth." "Terror just walked into my office, says he's calling a parent-teacher conference, mandatory attendance." Grace responded immediately. "Time and location? Riverside Commons, 3 p.m. says to bring Lily." The trap was obvious, but that's the thing about setting traps. Sometimes they catch the wrong target. If you're still with us, thank you. Writing this story takes time and heart, and we're just getting started. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments. Would you walk into that meeting, or would you make them wish they'd never called it? Isolate the targets. Use the child as leverage. Demonstrate dominance by demanding attendance. It was a textbook intimidation op, executed with military precision. But the Crimson Riders had made a fatal mistake. They believed forcing a confrontation gave them control. They didn't realize they were stepping straight into a trap Grace had spent all morning constructing. "Ray," Grace said calmly, standing up from the diner booth. "Time to call in that favor." He didn't even blink. 2 years ago, she'd quietly helped Ray deal with an abusive ex. No threats, no violence. The man had simply vanished. And later, a notarized confession appeared on the police chief's desk. Grace's way was never loud, but it was final. She turned to Doc next. "Get your old kit ready," she said. Doc's eyes narrowed. He'd patched enough battlefield wounds to know exactly what that meant. "Grace," he said quietly, "what did you actually do in the military?" She smiled faintly. "File says administrative support." Then, after a beat, "File says a lot of things." As Grace walked back to her car, she spotted 3 more Crimson Riders tailing her. Perfect spacing, clean sightlines. Their surveillance was surgical, efficient. But that's what made it vulnerable. Because Grace Bennett hadn't spent 20 years in the SEALs just learning to fight. She'd learned how to make an enemy's strengths betray them. In 3 hours, the Crimson Riders would learn a harsh truth. There's a difference between seeing a target and understanding what you're aiming at. 3 p.m., Riverside Commons. The sun cast long gold shadows as Grace arrived, Lily's hand tucked firmly in hers. 12 bikes, 3 black SUVs. This wasn't a meeting. It was a show of force. "They've blocked all the exits," Lily whispered, "except the front, and someone near the side door. They're breathing heavy." Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. Her own observations confirmed it. The sentries were positioned like professionals, but their tension was obvious. They were expecting resistance. Bennett," Terror called out across the lot, stepping into the sunlight. "Glad you could make it to our little meeting." 4 more gang members flanked him. Shock, Typhoon. All eyes were on Grace and Lily. Grace moved forward with calm, cautious energy. "Didn't seem like I had much of a choice." "There's always a choice," Terror smirked. "Smart ones and stupid ones." He let the silence hang heavy, a threat without needing to say it. Inside, the Commons had been rearranged. Chairs formed a loose circle. Grace immediately spotted Barbara Prescott, pale, stiff-backed. David Park was there too, clutching his daughter's hand, eyes down. Every parent present had a child in the school's special needs program. "This," Terror announced, arms wide, "is a community discussion about the future of certain expensive programs." Grace's eyes scanned the space. 20 riders in total. 3 by emergency exits, 2 watching windows. The rest evenly spaced. Enough to maintain control but not overcrowd. It was good positioning. Too good. It created blind spots. "Mom," Lily whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "Mr. Wilson is here. I can smell his medicine bag." Grace had already spotted Doc seated near the rear, medical kit at his feet. Their signal was set. Everything was in place. Terror took center stage like a commander on parade. "Special needs programs," he began, "cost money. And frankly, they're accidents waiting to happen. But with the right kind of protection," he looked straight at Lily, "we make sure everybody stays safe." "How much?" Barbara asked, her voice shaking. $5,000 a month per family?" Gasps filled the room. "That's more than most of us make," David Park snapped. Shock stepped forward, knife in hand. "Cheaper than hospital bills," he muttered. Lily's fingers tapped rapidly against Grace's palm. 3 quick, 2 slow, imminent threat. Then, the quiet click of a switchblade behind them. Grace heard it too. Terror grinned. "Take your time deciding." But accidents, well, they happen quick, especially to kids who can't see them coming. The silence was deafening. Parents held their children tighter, breaths caught in throats. Grace had been counting every step, every movement. And now, the rider's perfect plan was about to turn against them. Right on cue, yelling erupted outside. Ray's voice raised in mock anger. The sentries turned, distracted, exactly as planned. Grace stepped forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was the same voice she'd used briefing strike teams before Black Ops missions. Calm, deadly, final. "I have a counteroffer," she said. Terror turned, a grin playing across his face. "Oh, this should be good." When a violent gang called the Crimson Riders threatens Grace Bennett and her blind daughter Lily, they assume they're targeting easy prey. But Grace, a former covert SEAL operative, calmly warns them, "Leave now, don't come back." When they refuse, she triggers a series of carefully orchestrated events. Using fake gunfire, sabotage, and silent strikes, she disables their enforcers without leaving a trace. As the gang escalates, bringing in reinforcements and surrounding the town, Grace stays steps ahead. She's trained the community, especially Lily, to track danger through sound and instinct. Their surveillance starts to fail. Bikes mysteriously break down. Fear spreads. Grace turns the gang's strength into weakness, causing confusion, paranoia, and internal collapse. When the gang's powerful backers send elite military contractors and advanced surveillance teams, Grace counters them using psychological warfare and hidden traps built over years. Eventually, the federal government's dark secrets start to unravel. Grace had once been part of their illegal human enhancement program, and she uses that knowledge to disable even the most advanced operators. Lily, carrying the same genetic enhancements, becomes the symbol of a new kind of strength: perception, compassion, and control. In the end, the town of Riverside doesn't just survive. It becomes a model of resistance. The gang is dismantled. The corrupt network behind them is exposed. Grace proves that true strength doesn't come from fear, violence, or control. It comes from protecting others, teaching them to stand together, and turning every hidden weapon into a lesson.